the FY08 water and sewer rates. We will have a staff presentation to go over the recommendation by staff. And we will open up to a public comment on the subject of this evening, which is FY08 water and sewer rates. Having said that, we can start the presentation. Ms. Kelly, you presenting?
Yes, I'm speaking.
Okay.
I'm stuck speaking tonight. We'll review the presentation we gave on the 10th, and then we have individual slides for the particular rates to be voted. We'll start with the other night's presentation. The Board of Public Works was tasked by the Board of Selectmen with the job of evaluating the existing rate structure and the following goals: encourage conservation, decrease costs for low volume users, and establish a more equitable model while meeting the cost of operations. We came out with 4 model options. One is at Tier 3, a 3-tier system with no change. It would have annual resets, the same breakpoints, and we would average multi-unit apartment complexes, a 3-tier structure without averaging multi-unit dwellings. We would have quarterly resets at the same breakpoints, and again, no averaging for multi-unit apartments. A 5-tier system with multi-unit dwelling averaging and quarterly resets. And the staff recommendation is a 5-tier structure without multi-unit dwelling averaging, and it would have quarterly usage resets. The decision points for the board tonight are for consumption tier resets, annual versus quarterly, a 3-tier or 5-tier structure, and whether we use multi-unit dwelling factor, which is averaging for apartments. A comparison of annual versus quarterly consumption tier reset calculations. The current annualized billing process provides 156 units of water at the lowest tier. Once that threshold is reached, the customer moves to Tier 2 for the balance of the fiscal year at a rate that's 29% higher than Tier 1, or until they hit Tier 3, which is 14% higher than Tier 2, and 48% higher than Tier 1. And when we add sewer onto that, you're almost at 94% higher from Tier 1 to Tier 3. The proposed quarterly billing process considers each 3-month period independently. If a customer moves out of Tier 1 in a particular quarter, they may, through their own conservation, reduce their usage back to Tier 1 for the future quarters, and that will save them money that they wouldn't be saving in an annualized model. Since the fiscal year runs from June to July, when we have an annualized model, people are paying their lower rate at the time they can conserve most, and they slip into the higher tier when there are fewer opportunities to conserve. So in the winter and early spring, when you're not using as much water and there isn't that much opportunity to conserve, you slip into the higher tier. This disadvantage may result in higher costs to residents. In a recent survey of Massachusetts communities determined that Framingham is the only municipality that calculates usage on an annual basis. The current annual consumption structure includes 3 tiers in units 0 to 156, 157 to 3,000, and 3,000 plus. A 5-tier quarterly model was developed by the staff with a goal of encouraging conservation and rewarding residents who use the least amount of water by reconfiguring and expanding tiers 1 and 2. And the proposed quarterly breakpoints are 0 to 12, 13 to 27, 28 to 51, 52 to 750, and over 750. Any model can work with quarterly consumption tiers. Only the 3-tier structure can work with the annual consumption tier reset. The 5-tier structure will not work with that. The average residential customer uses approximately 26 units of water each quarter. 24% of the resident accounts use 12 units or less quarterly, but receive no savings for their conservation efforts. The proposed 5-tier model would reward conservation by offering lower tier breakpoints and rates. This is a pictorial of the comparison between tiers. We have the 3-tier model on the left, the 5-tier model on the right, in the middle, and we have the percentage of residential accounts in these tiers. And you can see that Tier 1 splits into Tier 1, 2, and 3 of the 5-tier model, and Tier 2 splits into Tier 3 and 4 of the 5-tier model. And Tier 3 is a straight shot over to Tier 5. And the majority, you can see the majority, almost 70%, or actually 70% of the customers are in the first 2 tiers in a 5-tier model. The multi-unit dwelling factor that averages usage for apartments, the current billing structure for multi-unit complexes with 1 meter, divides usage by the number of dwelling units in the housing complex. This reduces their cost through averaging. For example, the current structure complex with 10 units must use 1,560 units of water before it reaches Tier 2. Without that multi-unit dwelling factor, the housing complex with 1 meter would pay on the total usage of the complex. Surveys confirm that this approach is currently used by comparable municipalities. So that same 10-unit complex would move to Tier 2 after using 157 units. The multi-unit dwelling factor analysis has examples here. Number of housing units is on the left-hand column. The price that they would pay using averaging, the price they would pay without averaging, and what the difference would be on an annual basis. That difference then broken down by unit and then by unit per month, with a 50-unit complex increasing by $14.43 per unit per month, and a 306-unit complex increasing by $26.02 per unit per month. The staff recommendation is a 5-tier rate structure using quarterly consumption resets, eliminating the multi-unit dwelling factor, which averages for apartments, and that would be apartment complexes of 5 or more units, anything over 4 units, and maintain the current irrigation rate to encourage conservation. The implementation of this recommendation, combined with the lower than budgeted MWRA assessments, will result in lower unit costs across all tiers. And this is an example of several account types. We have a 4-person family with 96 units of usage would save $46.65 in the course of a year. Another example of a 4-person family at 75 units would save $50.34. A 2-person family at 69 units of usage would save $51.30. And one version of a senior discount customer at 58 units would save $45.45. And another one at 60 units would save $46.80. A 50-unit apartment complex that uses 2,840 units would actually pay $5,674.70 more for the whole complex. And then the average cost to a particular dweller in that complex would be determined, of course, by the apartment management, but if you just did a straight division, then you would have that increase divided by 50. Depends on what the manager wants to do with that increase, I guess. A restaurant, typical restaurant using 997 units of water would be have a decrease of $1,134.84. And a fast food restaurant that uses 4,272 units of water would have a decrease of $540.84. And that this assumes, all these examples assume that the consumption level of these entities would remain relatively consistent to the year that we've been studying, which is the prior year. This is the comparison of rates, combined meter rates per 100 cubic feet. And for the purposes of abbreviation, multi-unit dwelling is MUD. We have a number of ranges here, and they cross over a 3-tier versus 5-tier system, so that's why there's more than 5 lines up there. A tier 1 in both systems, or in a quarterly usage range, 0 to 12 units. The staff recommended rate is $6.39. That's combined water and sewer. And you can see, looking across that particular row, it is the lowest cost rate of the multiple options. In the usage range of 13 to 27 units per quarter, the 5-tier structure without averaging comes to $6.74. And you can see that that's also the lowest of the options in that row. No, it's slightly high. It's slightly higher than without averaging for a 3-tier. And then 28 to 39 units is $7.95. And it repeats in row 2 because that's actually a split of the tier 5. That's across tier 3, that range of usage, but it's also comparable to tier 2 of the 3-tier system. So you end up having to repeat that row. So from 52 to 750 units per quarter, the rate's $9.44 for a 5-tier structure without averaging. And then over 750 units is $12.18 on the 5-tier structure without averaging. The irrigation rate is $5.32, which is no change from the prior year. And the senior tier 1 examples are the bottom tier, and I wrote senior tier 1 so you could see what it was, but that's essentially 0 to 12 units per quarter, which is the same as 0 to 48 per annual. And you have a rate of $4.80 for that particular tier. The senior discount is 25% across the entire consumption, not just particular to tier 1. And that's it.
Any questions? From the bill's perspective, when our bills are sent out, do we send anything out in those bills that would inform the seniors or give them an opportunity to apply for that 25% off? And if not, where do they find that?
We do a mailing every year to the existing accounts, informing them that they need to renew.
Okay.
And then we do a mailing every year, just informing all the residents of the senior citizen
Okay,
accounts.
great. Thanks.
Just one question. Once again, I want to commend the staff for simplifying the whole presentation. It's a lot easier to understand and makes our job easier. And at least I think the public for the first time probably understands how water rates are set. But I do have one question, and I know the rates that are being proposed are going to be lower for fiscal '08, mainly because the MWRA assessment is going down. I want to contrast that with the fact that we're mandated now to do about $100 million worth of sewer improvements over the next 10 years. And we have to pay for that one way or the other. Even though we may get low interest loans, we're still going to have to pay for that. And I want to avoid having spikes in the rates. Let's say we get to year 4, 5, or 6, and we're short money, and we're going to have to spike the rates to cover those costs. And I want to make sure that that doesn't happen, that we have balanced rates throughout the 10 years of this infrastructure improvement. So my question is, has that been considered? And if there's a potential that we're going to have a spike in rates because of that, those sewer improvements, does it make sense to begin to build up the reserves now in fiscal '08 by keeping the rates a little bit higher than you're proposing, so we don't see a big increase in rates in future years?
Well, one of the things we have in the balances of both funds are retained earnings, and in water retained earnings, I believe there's about $2.8 million in retained earnings, and in sewer there's actually $4 million in retained earnings. Some of that comes because of the revenues that come in from the Ashland IMA, for one, and other fees that are charged for different services. So, and we do use retained earnings for some of the project costs to reduce the debt service, but we do build debt service at the projected rate, not the actual rate, into these budgets in order to build the rate. So if we end up saving a little, and one of the things we did this year was not bond as much as we had projected we would bond, because the projects are moving a little bit more slowly. But we have taken that margin into account so that we increase the rate at what we estimate we're going to bond, not what we actually bond. So in some instances, we do end up having a bit of cushion there built in already.
So you're comfortable in these rates that are being proposed, that we're not going to be faced with a major increase in sewer rates 3-4 years down the road?
Not unless the MWRA has a huge increase in their assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skinsky. It's a good question. I just want to follow so I understand and so it'll be clarified for the public also, that you're saying that retained earning is really a savings account that can be used to buffer some spikes so that it doesn't go up one year and go down the next year, but that softens that blow. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what we could do with it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, before I open up for public comment, I would like to read one letter that I was asked to read into the record, and it's from the Standing Committee on Public Works. It reads, it's dated, July 5th, 2007, which was prior to Tuesday night's working session. So some of the data may not have been available when this letter and vote was taken, but I will read it. This communication serves to inform the Board of Selectmen that the Standing Committee on Public Works voted 8 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstentions at its meeting held June 28, 2007, that I, Christine Long, as chairman of the Standing Committee on Public Works, advise the Board of Selectmen to consider the committee's position with respect to the upcoming setting of water and sewer rates. 1. The Standing Committee on Public Works strongly recommends that the only change to be made should be the following. 1 bill undivided to be sent to each property owner as recorded in the town assessor's office. In this way, apartment buildings owners will be paying their fair share. 2, the Standing Committee on Public Works position is that the town should remain the current billing policies, 3 tiers with no base rate charge, to ensure fairness to all ratepayers and to avoid overbilling certain precincts as occurred with seasonal rate billings in the 90s. The Standing Committee on Public Works feel that this is unfair to shift the burden of fee collection onto the residential customer. 3, the Standing Committee on Public Works strongly recommends that no change be made to the current rate setting until after the Board of Selectmen hold public hearing on this matter, which is this evening. Please enter this document as part of the record when discussing and voting on this matter. Respectfully submitted, Christine Long, Chairman of the Standing Committee on Public Works. Having said that, I'll open up to any public comment. Ms. Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christine Long, Chair, Standing Committee on Public Works. And obviously that communication did come before the new presentation. That we had voted on an entirely different proposal, and we have not met again since this, obviously, because Tuesday night was the first time we saw this. I was at that meeting, and as a former member of the former task force, 2005 to the 2006, I would recommend, and one of my suggestions was a 5-tier structure. I really like this a lot. I don't know who came up with it or how you guys devised it, but I think you did a great job. I think this addresses, this is my own opinion, this doesn't reflect the Standing Committee. As a ratepayer and as the chair, of that committee, I recommend myself the 5-tier structure, and it eliminates, actually, a lot of the things we talked about in the Standing Committee are addressed with this new structure rate. It does reduce, it gives the elderly an additional bonus discount. It gives the regular residential customer a fair rate to pay. It eliminates the multi-unit dwelling portion where they're kicked into a lower rate by dividing the units in the building. And I think it addresses most of the concerns we've had. So, I know myself, I'm in favor of this. I like it. I think you did a great job, everybody who worked on it. And that would be my comment on it.
Thank you,
so,
Ms.
thank you.
Very much. Any other comments? Mr. Labage. Good evening, sir.
Yeah. Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm William LaBarge, town meeting member, precinct 16 chair, and also a member of the Standing Committee for Public Works. Also, I have a question which probably be appropriate for the Board of Health. I was just curious on, how much water, minimum, low end and high end, will a person be using and still be able to maintain health? Like how many units per year or anything like that?
We can pose that question, Mr. Bodge, but this discussion this evening is around rate structure.
Yeah, the only reason why I'm asking on the rate structure is when it comes to coming up with a tier, we don't want to go and, we want to make sure that we don't set things so low where a large family can never be able to be quote conserving water to save money. That's the only reason why I'm asking that.
Thank you, Mr. Bodge. Any other comments from the public? Mr. Welty. Good evening, Mr. Welty.
Ted Welty, President of the Metro West Chamber. And first I'd like to commend this board for the action that you took over 2 years ago, at least some of you, in initiating this process that was a total review of the water and sewer rate process and the policies that are used in setting those rates. I'd also like to commend the folks at the town level and other individuals that were involved who worked over that 2+ year period to come up with the proposal you have before you tonight. I think this is well thought out. You have some basic policy decisions before you tonight that could change the process clearly, but I think from the point of equity and the point of looking out for the smaller households that do not need as much water and maybe don't have the means to afford higher rates, I think this really addresses that issue, especially among the seniors. So I think that in balance, this is a very good proposal that you have before you. In the best of all worlds, we'd have flat rates, but we know that that's not going to happen. I think Mr. Szyczki at the last meeting mentioned the fire service charges. I was pleased to hear that they're basically flat in this coming year. I think we may want to revisit that as more and more cost information becomes available on some of the efforts that Mr. Sellers is making right now. I think we may want to take a closer look at that and some of the other issues facing these rate structures. But for now, this looks like a very good proposal that you have before you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Welty. Mr. O'Neill. Good evening, Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you. Good evening to you. Tom O'Neill of Precinct 8. And I have just a question. I'm really not sure that I have any comment because I'm not sure that I fully understand the process that's used. But who are the largest users of water in the town of Framingham?
Mr. Sellers?
Anybody venture a guess? I mean, could you give me 4 or 5?
Well, the very largest users of water, if they were categorized as single users, say the large apartment complexes on Route 9, where they have maybe 1 meter to serve 120 or 130 units. Some manufacturing facilities like Breyers, ice cream, and say Genzyme, those types of industrial facilities.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, MCI is another, the prison is another one, and the college is another one, and the hospital is also a very large consumer.
Okay, and they're really in this tier 3?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I don't fully understand my water bill. I'm looking at it right now, and it doesn't mean a darn thing to me except that I just paid $354.54 in, what is it, January, I guess. Sometime in January. It was due January 30th. I guess I really don't have a specific comment. I am a little concerned, though, with something that was in the paper regarding the fact that other communities have been doing something different than Framingham is doing. And I believe CFO was quoted in the paper, in the article in the paper. What was the meaning of that?
Ms. Kelly?
In two instances, we surveyed, for two items, we surveyed municipalities across the state, and in two instances, one was for annualized billing. We are the only community that we know of in the state that uses annualized billing. Every other community resets their usage quarterly, including Boston, Quincy, and all of our neighboring communities. And then the other one was on using averaging for apartment buildings, and we surveyed all of the comparable communities, and nobody divides their apartment usage into units. They all bill one bill for the entire complex. So those are two differences. We are unique in those two categories.
But the recommendation that
Is
the
to
staff
eliminate
made
them.
would be to eliminate that difference to go with what all the other cities and towns are doing.
Would that be an advantage to the individual
Yes.
dwelling
Yes.
unit?
Yes.
That's the purpose.
To-
Yes. It's advantage to a single family dwelling, yes.
And we haven't done that, though.
That's what we're proposing for this new rate.
Oh, okay, fine, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask
Sure, Ms. Sister.
that this will not only benefit single-family homeowners, it will help businesses as well on their.
No, that's good. I guess I'm a little bit concerned with it, having watched my favorite program, the one program I watch every week, Andy Rooney, and he did a story on the cost per gallon that we pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Hittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Bill Hibbard, Precinct 8. Excuse me. I just wanted to make sure we understand that the multi-unit dwelling averaging is being eliminated for large apartments, buildings only, not for condos. That the condos will continue to have division by multi-units, and that is not, as I understand it, was done in other communities. In other communities, all multi-unit apartments do not have multi-unit dwelling averaging. So we are doing something different in this community. Not too long ago, Chapel Hill converted from apartments to condominiums, which will mean that that particular unit will now fall under the condo multi-unit dwelling averaging factor. And also will be eligible now for trash collection, since we now collect trash from condo units but not from apartment buildings. And my only concern is that other large apartment buildings don't also convert to condos, which not only will then go back to the division by the multi-unit dwelling factor, but will also create an additional cost out of the general budget rather than water and sewer budget, but will cost out of the general budget for trash collection as well. So those are things that need to be at least thought about.
Thank you, Steve.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Esty?
Yeah, I think that we did say that we would be studying the method of billing the condos, that they can be billed directly to owners, and that we should go to make it equal to single-family homeowners, that they would be billed on a 3 months basis instead of a monthly basis. But also, I noticed in our packet that we had information about the home ownership. It came from the housing conference that Mr. Giambetti put together, and I missed. But it had information about the numbers of condos, the numbers of owner-occupied condos, and this is another thing we could look at if condo ownership is being used as essentially an apartment building, and if somebody owns more than 4, that we should consider charging it at a different rate. And that way, nobody would be taking advantage of what we offer. So, and I thought some of the condos looked like a larger percent were absentee landlord. on the condo ownership. And so this might be an area that we haven't looked at yet that we could consider looking at. And I'd like to recommend that we build that into our plan for the future.
Thank you, Ms.
And
Hesty.
so moved, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hesty.
Second.
I have a motion to look at that aspect of the rates for condo over the next year. Is that your
Yes.
thinking, Ms. Hesty? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you, Ms. Hesty. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, is the wish of the board to act on these rates?
Yes.
And if so, do we have an actual slide that shows the rates? So we know what the...
Coming up.
Right.
This again is the summary combined rates. This is the specific water and sewer rates for the recommended structure, if that's the structure that the board is voting on.
So I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, once again, I want to thank the staff for a fine job and recommendations, and I would move that we accept the staff recommendations as presented tonight, which means that we would go to quarterly resets, go to 5 tiers, would not do apartment averaging, and would keep the senior discount and keep a separate irrigation rate, among other things.
Second.
Any further discussions, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We have another motion that we need?
We have several specific votes.
Okay.
The second is the out-of-town rates.
I'm
This
sorry.
is,
My motion was meant to include the entire staff recommendation,
oh, okay.
including that and the...
And private fire?
Yes.
I
Sorry.
guess that
Could do it all
motion...
in one vote?
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
We've done it in
covers
one
all the
vote.
recommendation.
Mr.
Chairman, would you like us to
show the fire rate slides?
I think this hasn't been seen before.
Yeah, I think that would be
I'm
helpful.
sorry for
That's
jumping
okay.
the gun on that.
We have 2 motions.
This is the out-of-town rate, where the water surcharge and sewer surcharge are specifically pulled out for you to see, whereas we've combined them in prior years. So these are the individual water and sewer rates on a 5-tier system, and it would, the out-of-town surcharge for water is $3.71, and the sewer charge is $3.99 per tier. It's even across the tier.
I think
This does actually decrease slightly because the entire base rate decreases slightly.
I think we should have separate motions. Why don't we do
Okay.
that? So I'll entertain a motion that, for the out-of-town rate.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Next.
And this is the private fire service, which has a 0% change across all tiers. Although if you actually push that decimal point out a little bit, you'd see that it does change in a microscopic fashion, so that the 12-inch size pipe actually gets $1.38 decrease.
Really? So generous.
I know.
Any questions of this? Do we have a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Any further discussion, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much.
That's it.
The other matter that we talked about a few months ago, we brought up briefly on Tuesday night, was those parcels that have land in both Framingham and Natick, and I was wondering if, not just Natick, but Framingham and any town that borders it. Mr. Suso, do you have a recommendation from Commissioner
Certainly,
on those?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. As you noted, that was discussed a bit the other evening, and I know the selectmen had received some information on it. And my recommendation would be that the selectmen consider that for those residential parcels that are cited, a portion of which is located within the town of Framingham, that those be billed at in-town rates, but that would only apply to residential units, not including multi-unit, multi-family dwellings.
Any questions?
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion, question? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thank you. And I think that covers the, Mr. Suso.
Pardon me, Mr. Chairman, did
Sure.
you want me to note that voting issue?
Oh, yes, please do
Yeah,
that,
right,
yes,
that
thank
would
you
be in order.
for, yes.
Thanks, Mr.
This
Chairman.
is nothing to do with water and sewer rates, but it has to do with a item that happened on Tuesday night at our last selectment meeting. Mr. Suso?
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the voting on the 15-member CDBG Advisory Committee, Selectmen may recall there were 10 individuals that were advanced by Board of the Selectmen to that committee. For the last 5 positions, there were 6 candidates. And due to an error in the calculations on those final 5 positions for which there were 6 candidates being considered, there was an error in the tabulation for which I apologize, but which would require, with the Selectmen's concurrence, a revote to determine your preferences for the 5 individuals to go in those 5 positions from among the 6 competing. If it would be your wishes, you could complete that at your upcoming meeting.
My suggestion is to do it on the 24th, our next meeting, so we can at least advise
Advise
those 6
everybody, yeah.
applicants, they can come in.
Excellent.
And they can prepare if they want to while we vote. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, why don't we do
Thank you,
that
Mr.
then?
Chairman.
Great, thank you so
I
very
know
much.
that one of the candidates will be on her way to Italy,
Okay. Take adjourn.
but she's already spoken to us.
I have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
And standing, oh my
Awesome.
God. Awesome.